Hello! It's Friday. I'm filming a Fun Day Friday video on said Friday. Do I want to know what? 5:24. Perfect. Yes, hi Tiggs. Tiggs is having a hard problem with this one because I've got a variety of things in front of me because I was racking my brain to figure out what I was going to. She's walking through the tripod right now. So, there's that. Racking my brain to try and figure out what I was going to do with this video because I try and have these done in advance, and this one obviously has not happened in advance. And a big part of that is because there were suddenly a lot of changes that I was not expecting in my life, most notably with my living situation. It's in the process of getting handled, but it's further changed even today. So I am just dealing with it as it comes. And with all of these changes comes a lot of anxiety. And I suddenly realized that maybe that's what I could do my video about. So today's Fun Day Friday video is an introduction to a lot of more recent tools that I have put into my toolbox for dealing with both my anxiety and my depression. Fun! Actually, I think this video is going to be really interesting for me because as I was thinking about all these tools, I realized how many of them really are recent additions that I'm figuring out now. But keep in mind, of course, these are like very personalized ones to me. This is not an advice video about how to deal with all of these things because a lot of this has to be personalized to you. And there is a big one that I would love to get for myself that I recognize is critical, and if you're in the position where you can do it, you should, which is to say, to see a therapist. If I get the opportunity coming up, I most definitely am, and I might have that opportunity due to the fact that I am starting a program in September, so there's a possibility through my university of being able to see somebody. And I want to. I have seen a therapist twice throughout my life. Just very short coverage. Usually it's about a month where it's a weekly appointment due to what is was covered under my mother's health plan, which I have aged out of. But I have really found that even those short spurts have been very useful and have actually had a lasting effect on my mental health, simply because even those short amount of times have allowed me to recognize some things. Ongoing would be fantastic, and I definitely recognize there are probably some tools that I don't have in my toolbox yet that a trained professional is going to help me with. So, if that's my piece of advice to you, it is that I am working on it for myself. What I'm here today to discuss about is something that I think is also going to be useful for me because it's sort of a reflection back on what I've added recently and why I have, which isn't something you necessarily always articulate. That's the weird thing about school that, like, I'm consciously aware of, especially when it comes to, like, academic things, is this concept of internalization and externalization. This is going to sound really weird, but welcome to my head. That this entire video is me in my head, right? So this concept is that there are external things in the world that you internalize, and then it's a question of whether you externalize them again. To simplify this, like, it's learning a new word. So there is a word out there in the world, let's say charcuterie, because this is one of the most recent ones that's happened to me. So you learn about this word, and suddenly you see this word everywhere, and you internalize the use of this word. How do you internalize it? Well, you now know what the word is, and that's pretty cool. And maybe sometimes in your head you'll even be like, oh yeah, it'd be nice to have a charcuterie board someday. words, this is a really good example of also that externalization again, you tend to do that. So you learn a word, and then you start using that word. Like charcuterie is really interesting for me because I work in tourism, which involves meals. And there is a way that you can get a charcuterie board from my company. So that's just a word I know. And then every now and then I teach somebody what that is, because maybe somebody I'm explaining it to doesn't know what that is. By the way, you have a cheese board and then you have a charcuterie board, which is usually the meats, and every now and then there's something like olives, like very specific vegetables on the charcuterie board. And sometimes there's dips like hummus. Now you know. So we can learn this with concepts as well, not just words, but precisely, again, those coping mechanisms that a therapist might be able to give you, you're going to internalize, but there's also a question of externalizing it. Physical things are a lot easier to externalize, right? You learn how to cartwheel, so then you cartwheel. Internal things are harder to externalize. So I've learned that these tools are useful. I externalize in the way that I use these tools, but I don't necessarily externalize why I find these tools useful until now. And that actually then helps you internalize things better as well. It's this really cool cycle that there are definitely negative versions of the cycle, and those ones you hear about a lot. For example, abuse, bullying, things like that. But there are definitely positive versions of this cycle. So basically, someone teaches you a self-care concept, you internalize that, apply it to yourself, externalize why it's useful, like maybe speak to a friend about it, or continue speaking to your therapist about it and say, I have tried this thing, and then you suddenly better understand not only yourself, but how this tool can actually be more useful, and then you improve the use of it. Let's look at some of these tools that I have added to my toolbox recently. And like I said, some of these are going to be much more generalized. Some of them are going to be very specific to me. I'm just going to grab off the stack. I made a stack of the tools walking around my apartment. This one should have been a really obvious one to me, but I've only recently really started using that to a more conscious degree, which is exercise. I have started in this month alone really amping up, encouraging myself to actively do some exercise, particularly yoga here, because a lot of the rest of the summer there is exercise, like walks are a big thing. But I'm a walking tour guide, so that's not always like the positive type of exercise I need. And when I think about it, I don't nearly get out as often as I should now. So doing some even in the apartment here is a critical lesson I've learned recently, which is anything that's worth doing is worth doing poorly. That sounds really weird because most people know anything that's worth doing is worth doing well, but when you have depression and anxiety, it's worth doing poorly. You're not going to be able to perfectly fix everything. That's not how heads and mental illness work. So, eating is worth doing even if it's worth doing poorly. If you're wondering, I'm eating a lot of KFC chicken bowls right now. But I'm also at least getting some exercise in my home. Yoga I've found particularly helpful where I am in life because I work on my feet a lot, not only doing walking tours, but also manning the store. And I hold myself very tensely, especially when I'm interacting with people, and I constantly need to keep up this very cheerful persona of, hi, how can I help you? Oh, that's terrible. Please feel free to yell at me while I try and fix this problem. So I didn't realize how badly I was feeling physically until I actually went ahead and just made myself do some yoga. and then suddenly all my muscles started to relax, and I was like, oh, that's what this feels like again. I really like this one. This just happens to be one that my family has, and periodically I've picked it up. I am starting to try and make it a habit, and what I really like about this one is they have both morning and evening ones, but there's one in particular that I've been doing well enough with that even if I'm not watching the video, I can apply the positions and relieve some tension. It's been a lot of leg and back work that I've been focusing on, which I have really needed. So that's very cool. So get some exercise. And again, I will stress this. If it's worth doing, it's worth doing poorly. So if you like just taking a walk in the woods, but you don't think that's as active as you should be, take those walks. There is nothing worse than discouraging yourself from trying because you're not perfect. The other weird thing, and they're sitting right on the top of my stack, so I think I'm gonna have to mention it. I'm trying to figure out how I can do this nicely. So along with getting myself into yoga, I have also been really working hard on doing some like physical healthcare stuff, self-care. Actually remembering, have showers when you're supposed to, brush your teeth as often as you're supposed to, drink the gosh darn water. That's another very generalized one. Drink some water, especially right now with the heat. And it's not always easy, but there definitely been things that I've been trying again to make habits. And moisturizer become a very useful tool, because especially when I'm super stressed, my legs become super dry and very, very itchy. And again, just like exercising and stretching out your muscles, you don't always realize how badly it's affecting you until you can help deal with it. So I picked this up from Bath & Body Works and have been using it on my legs. I've also got a sugar scrub that I use in the shower on my legs, and it hasn't solved the problem completely, but I'm definitely doing better. This is also very interesting because it ties into a third tool that is probably very specific to me and is going to sound real weird, but that is scents. It turns out I really like nice smells that aren't overpowering. So this one is champagne, apple, and honey, and it's beautiful, but again, it's not overwhelming, especially when I put it on my legs. And what's really interesting is then I've incorporated this in more subtle ways as well. So on my bag now is this cute little guy. People think he looks like Toothless, but it is a cat. He's got the fuzzy little tail. And what it's actually holding is a little thing of hand sanitizer. Again, this is me working on the physical care because I've gotten sick a lot this summer, because that's what happens when you're working long hours in smaller spaces with a lot of coworkers and also dealing with the general public. So hand sanitizer, real good plan. Even better for Angie and her anxiety, hand sanitizer with a really pretty smell. So this is a Berry Galactic Swirl, and it smells like summer berries, and it's fantastic. And as you can see, it sparkles, so fun times all around. And I carry that with me now, and again, I've been working on making a habit to make sure I'm going ahead and using this. The other subtle place I've been adding it is actually in my laundry. I just picked up some in-wash fragrance boosters. Berry seems to be a smell I'm really going for right now. This is Berry Blossom. And it's a very subtle scent. It's not overpowering at all. In fact, once I don't put enough in that it's clinging on up to 12 weeks. Like, I'm just putting it in, so I got that subtle burst when I put it on in the morning, and suddenly life doesn't seem nearly as scary. That's nice. So, scents and sound are also helping, and that's the big reason. So I've made a couple big purchases recently, one of which I'm going to get to later. It's sort of at the end, simply because of where it's sitting in the stack, but I've also picked up a record player, along with by far what has been my favorite album to play on the record player. Didn't even realize how badly this was going to hit me. So this is my Mumford & Sons Babel record, and this record player and record have been fantastic, again, as a tool. So when I really use this is long days where a shift, I won't say has gone super poorly. Like, I fully recognize, in the grand scheme of things, I haven't had any severely awful shifts recently. But they can get long. It can be a million small things that you're trying to deal with. Or it can be a bigger one. And you're just kind of like, great, perfect, okay. And when I get to that noise in my head, it has been so useful to put a record on. And this is going to change going forward, simply because, again, living situation's changing. But as I've been using it, it's set up in my office, which has a spare bed. And it has been so useful when my head just hits that pitch to put a record on and lie down on my bed and put something over my eyes. So I have a, like, heating, cooling bag with the little beads in it. Very useful. Or I might wet a cloth, either, again, hot or cold, and just lie out and listen to some music. So Mumford & Sons has been a big one. I also picked up Divide by Ed Sheeran, and that's been a big one. And then going forward, the next one I plan to pick up is the most recent album by Panic at the Disco. So, sounds, smells. Let's add taste in there. That would have been awful if I had just chucked this jar across. If I hadn't gotten that second hand. So this is my jar of tea. Tea. There's not much to say about that. Tea's been helpful. Especially if I'm already feeling kind of going into work. I brew some tea, I've got my mug to take it with me, and I take my water and my tea to work. I really like, there's a lot of fruity blends that I'm finding I really like. Let's see. Yeah, okay. Okay. So, the one that's not new is Buddha's Blend, which I have been drinking now for several years, having been introduced to it at a friend's birthday party, I want to say 4th year. Yeah, 4th year. More recently, though, I figured out a lot of fruity ones. So, Frozen Raspberry was the next one I really found. This one's fantastic. I love it. Sunny C and just Peachy. Sunny C I love because it really does taste like the tea version of Sunny D. And just Peachy, turns out I really like peach flavors. And I like getting them like these because I can take it to go. Because I've got like loose leaf as well, especially in the Buddha's Blend. But this allows me to take it to work with me. And I do carry 1 or 2 of these like in my pack, in my bag to work, so that if a day gets really bad, take a break and go brew some tea. And drink the tea. Actually, what's especially funny is I drink tea really weird, which is to say I like mostly cold tea. So I brew it, I have a couple of sips while it's hot, and then I leave it, i.e. forget about it, and then it's cold and everyone's like, oh, you're gonna drink that? And I was like, yeah, that's fantastic. And I just go for it. Mentioning brewing tea at work, it is worth mentioning some of the other smaller tricks I've learned at work, which is the biggest one I've realized recently is the store is attached to an office, and the office has like 2 sections to it. And if I've just had like an interaction that just caused my head to go, because again, in the grand scheme of things, I haven't had any super negative interactions, but I've certainly had interactions that have set my anxiety off. I've learned that at work, I can usually set it aside. I still need a moment. And when it's super busy, I've learned that slowing my breathing down, in the process of literally walking into the office, into the back office, touching the back wall, and turning around and walking back out, is usually enough for me to then come out and be like, excellent, who can I help next? It's just this real quick turnaround, cool down time. But what I do like about work is they do say, like, if you need it, warn a person and then go take a minute or 2. So I can just go sit in the back, or I can grab one of my bosses and be like, and they'd be like, okay, and help me deal with it. So, and what's kind of nice about this one is just gotta survive the summer, right? Just gotta get through the rest of August and we'll be good. My most recent addition to all of this is this thing. Isn't that pretty? So this is actually like, it's a hand exerciser, which I've purchased to help strengthen my left wrist. Okay, so that's my right. That's me real trying with my left. So my left wrist, after having broken it, is much weaker. Didn't realize how badly it was affecting me until I cracked it at work and had to go for an x-ray. It was fine, just like an air bubble, cracked with pain, but I've never had a nurse look so disappointed when she realized I haven't been doing exercises. And what's really nice about this one is it's also a stress reliever. So I've started doing some exercises with my left wrist, with my little whoop. On the opposite end, one of the big ones I've been using for many years is Sudoku. So I realized sort of late high school, early university, that being able to focus on minute things did help. So Sudoku's been here. I've realized more recently that I really like these type of books so that it can lie flat. And this one, it's a huge one I picked up from Costco because I just finished my other big one recently. So, to all those folks that walked in to me before an exam doing Sudoku and were like, man, you're so chill, you're not even worried about it. That's because I was trying not to be worried about it. And then we reach the 2 biggest ones coming up. I have spoken to you, Rach, about both of these. Let's just go with it. We're gonna go with the big one. So I mentioned with my record player that I had made another more expensive purchase recently. This is my weighted blanket. So this has been a concept that I've heard about for a couple of years. One of 2 that I think I'm going to go ahead and implement the second one as we're closer to winter as well. But a weighted blanket is basically, it's a blanket with weights in it. And again, it feels like little, like beads. Very tiny little beads. Like rice, less than rice size beads. And it's just, you lie under it and it puts a weight on you. I think it's a lot like the Thunder Buddy vest for pets. Basically, it's this weight. It's a comforting, reassuring weight. And I've been hearing about it for a while, but these blankets can get very expensive. Except Bed Bath & Beyond started advertising for their, like, when they do back to school, they're talking university, like dorm rooms. And weighted blankets went up on sale. And I saw that and I was like, I'm gonna finally do it. I paid a little extra to get a cooling one, so the fabric is cooler to the touch, which, do it. Trust me, do it. I don't care if you think you're going to be primarily using it in winter, you will heat up under this thing, don't even worry about it. So if you bring the temperature down a little bit, do it. So this one is very useful. It's helped me on a couple of days where I have been physically tired, but my brain has been like, bleh, to help me go to sleep. If I am in need of a nap, this is fantastic. I used to have such a hard time, even when I was aware that I needed a nap, like if my body really needed it, to be able to get to sleep anyways, despite that. So the weighted blanket has been a godsend for that. And then I use it in tandem. So if I'm not trying to go to sleep, but I'm at that anxious point, like if I'm in here listening to music, this is a backup. If, like, I find the anxiety is really bad, I can do the weighted blanket. I might watch YouTube with it, things like that. So this has been well worth the cost of it for me. The other one that I mentioned that I really think I'm going to implement, especially towards the winter, is an additional light, so that I can get me some light in my life, even in the winter. But the weighted blanket was a now purchase, and I am so glad I went ahead and did it. Okay, and then we're on to the last one. And you probably know exactly what this is. And no, it's not just the book. Okay, so recently I have in fact started playing D&D to the point where I've now got 2 campaigns going. Because why only do it once when you can in fact do it twice? So, the reason why I've left this one for last, 1, because the book ended up at the bottom of the pile, but 2, this is probably one that's going to need a little more explanation as to the many reasons why I think it's very helpful, especially for my mental health. First and foremost, socialization is always important. Now, admittedly, I am an introvert who has to deal with people quite a bit in her job in tourism and retail. But that's why socialization on a different level is actually critical. Because talking to customers is not the type of socialization that your brain actually needs. Like, to be able to relax and joke with people, talk about cool things, and tell a story together, turns out it's really good for me, and this has just been like a critical change for me that's happened extremely recently. A big part of that is that I put all my cards on the table really early on, which I think helped. And it tells you again how much I feel my own mental health has improved, and my own awareness of it has improved, because the very first night that our group ended up together, and it wasn't just our group, like it was the beginner's night, we ended up with closer to like 16 people, and the DM went around the table and invited us to tell him what we would be interested in game-wise. Now, he was thinking more along the lines of, like, do you want a homebrew, or do you want me to use some of the pre-planned modules? Do you want one-shot, or or a full-length campaign? Do you want high fantasy, low fantasy, modern, things like that? And when it reached me, I blurted out precisely what I was thinking at the time, which is to say, hi, I'm Angela. I have severe anxiety and depression, so anything that gets me out of my own head is cool with me. And the DM went, me too. We've got each other. And I could have cried right there. In fact, I kind of still feel like crying. And what's really cool with this is it hasn't actually let up at all in some really interesting ways. Like, I've had other players just offhand mention that doing Dungeons and Dragons is good for them. Socialization's really good for them. It was nice for them to be able to get out of their apartments, to implement their creativity, things like that. So, like, me being really open there, I think, ultimately helped in its own way of, I don't feel like I have to hide it. Like, I feel like I can go in and everyone will be like, how are you doing today? And I'll be like, I'm having a shit day. Along with that, it doesn't stay that way, though. I'm not going to go in there and be like, I'm having a shit day, peace. No, I'm having a shit day, but we're going to tell a really cool story about these characters. And that's the other cool thing about this. There is, like, creativity happening, both communally and for myself. And again, I had to thank my DM for this. So I didn't realize it was going to happen, but one of our first really big role-playing sections, where we're setting up some, like, critical happenings going forward, he had my character run into something that I was really not expecting, which is to say, I have a cleric of a little-known religion, and one of the religious temples that belonged to this religion was being circumvented and used improperly. And I just got to rage and find something that my character could then go for. I didn't realize how much I needed to just be able to even play out emotions like this, because you tend to bottle them up. Like, raging and knocking over tables and screaming is not appropriate. But sometimes that's what your head wants you to do. And it turns out if you can play act that, even if you're not physically doing it, surprisingly good for your head. So I got to do that. And then, as I was thinking back on this, and creating a second character for the second campaign, which is sort of a smaller subset, with one of our players now acting as a DM, because again, he wants to try out something himself, I realized that, like, I'm trying different things with these characters. Like, I have picked characters that allow me to express different aspects that I'm basically playtesting to figure out what I want to incorporate into my own life. So I have Lydia, my halfling cleric of the Everlight, who is quieter, really harsh on herself, can be judgmental of others, but wants to fix things. Just maybe doesn't quite know how to do that yet, and doesn't know how to open up and talk about these things. And already I'm successfully starting to do that with Lydia, where I am successfully talking about some of these things. But she has her own demons to face. So we're going to see how that goes. And then on the other hand, I have now created Silver, my Tabaxi bard, who I said, because I'm asexual, isn't going to be the type that flirts with every moving thing and wants to bonk things. And wouldn't you know, I've already wrecked that, because it turns out what I really wanted to experiment here with is the connection between flirting and absolutely insulting somebody. And this one, we haven't even hit, like, full play time yet. We've just been working on the characters, understanding this homebrew world the DM has created on this one, and I'm already kind of like, okay, cool. This is going to be a performance one. This is going to be flashy, out there, let's do this. But not in the, hi, how are you folks doing kind of way. It's the out there, upbeat performance style that I want that's not just appeasing everybody. Like, I am trying to figure out a balance here, and Silver is here to help me do it. So who even knows what's going to happen? This is a really long video, I've realized, as I'm just talking over bits and pieces of my mental health. Hi, welcome to my toolbox for anxiety and depression. I am constantly trying to put tools in, experimenting with tools, and a few of them are coming out.